Okay, let's talk about online community groups. You know that feeling, right? You're scrolling through, maybe looking for a local recommendation or some community news, and suddenly a post about something seemingly simple just explodes.
Oh, absolutely. It's like watching neighborhood tension just, well, go digital.
Exactly.
What's always fascinating to me about these, online community dynamics is how quickly conflict can surface. And it often reflects these underlying frictions that exist offline, especially when emotions run high.
Like with pets or perceived safety.
Precisely, issues like that.
And that's exactly the kind of situation we're diving into today. We've got a stack of comments shared by a listener from a specific Facebook group, Friends of Lake Winola.
Ah,
Yeah, it's a dispute centered around dogs, and well, it escalated pretty quickly. Accusations, denials, the whole community sort of weighing in.
mm-hmm. So our mission for this deep dive then is pretty clear. We're using only the text within these specific Facebook comments you've got,
That's right, only the comments.
and we're going to unpack the core claims, the counterclaims, try to understand the different viewpoints presented by the commenters themselves.
Right, and see what this particular exchange, illustrates about how community conflict unfolds in a public online space.
Okay, sounds good. Where do we start?
All right, let's jump into the thread and find the spark. The comment that ignited this whole thing. According to these comments, it starts with a post from someone named Anya Dribas.
Right, Anya. She leads off by stating that those St. Bernards got out again.
Again, keyword.
Definitely. And she notes the warden has been notified. So this immediately frames it as a recurring problem, right? She claims the dogs continue to keep the post office side of the lake community on edge.
And she doesn't just stop at them getting out. She details specific concerns. First, there's the noise issue,
Mm-hmm.
stating they bark constantly day and night when left outside on the deck for hours.
Okay, so that paints a picture of pretty significant ongoing noise disruption for the neighbors.
Yeah, but the core of her concern, and I think the most serious claim, it really centers on aggression.
Right, and she's very specific there, isn't she?
She is. She claims that last summer, these dogs actually attacked two neighborhood dogs.
Attack two. Wow. Okay.
And she has a more recent incident, too. Claims just a couple of weeks prior, one of the dogs got loose and was growling at a neighbor in his own yard.
Growling in his own yard. Okay, so these are presented as like concrete instances of aggressive behavior when the dogs aren't contained?
Exactly. And based on these claims, she concludes the owner is putting the entire community at risk. She specifically mentions families with small children playing in their yards.
Understandable concern, if true.
And she openly questions whether the owner can really control three of these large dogs, and even suggests they maybe shouldn't have them.
That's quite direct.
And then Anya follows up, reinforcing these points. She mentions the dogs have a proven track record being aggressive when they get loose, and says she has recorded multiple incidents.
Okay, recorded multiple incidents. So the initial poster is laying out some serious allegations, repeated escapes, constant disturbance, and documented aggression leading to safety concerns and questioning the owner's fitness.
Right. It's a pretty strong opening volley.
Yeah.
Direct, detailed accusations. So how does the owner respond? Tara Rushnardone jumps in, and her reaction is, well, let's just say equally direct.
Yeah, it sounds like a forceful denial right from the start. Tara states Anya's comments are false statements and made-up stories.
Completely different narrative. She addresses the recent escape Anya mentioned, but gives a totally different version.
Yes, she confirms the dogs did get out, but she says only for 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Big difference from, again.
Right. And crucially, she adds that she and her husband were right behind them, and the dogs jumped into the vehicle within a few minutes. So this reframes it, doesn't it? From an uncontrolled incident into something brief, quickly managed.
Okay, but what about the aggression? That seemed to be Anya's main point, that proven track record.
Tara vehemently denies any aggression, just flat out denies it. She says the dogs have zero protection skills, that St. Bernards are bred to rescue humans and aggression goes against their nature.
So appealing to the breed standard.
Exactly. She firmly insists her dogs have not an aggressive bone in their body and they adore children. It's just a stark contradiction to Anya's claims of attacks and growling.
Completely opposite stories. How does she handle the barking? Anya said constant day and night.
Well, Tara explains that the constant barking is primarily from one dog named Lou.
Okay, specifics.
Yeah, she says Lou barks even when he's in bed, and that she's actually having him tested for hearing and possibly a learning disability. She says she's actively trying all the things before considering an anti-bark collar.
Hmm. So that shifts the narrative a bit, from maybe general negligence to a specific issue with one dog they're trying to manage.
Right. And she also expresses, significant upset and confusion. She states she was never made aware of neighbors, children, or pets being affected before this public post went up.
Which leads to her demanding the proof.
Exactly. She wants to see the documented proof of aggression that Anya mentioned.
And her frustration about it being public is really palpable in the comments.
Very clear. She questions why Anya didn't talk to her like an adult or suggest meeting the dogs or just reach out privately. She even offers, stop over for a tea and we can chat.
Calls the post childish and says she already called Anya directly.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's the mention of lawyers.
Yeah, that definitely raises the temperature.
It does. She brings it up twice. My attorney will be in touch now that I know who has been making the false statements, and then repeats it later. That certainly ratchets up the tension in the thread.
For sure. She also adds some quite detailed points about her dog's lives and care. Seems like she's trying to counter any idea they're neglected or poorly managed.
No, yeah, she goes into quite a bit of detail there. Mentions they eat much better than 75% of the people on this platform.
Wow. Specifics.
Yep. Only organic food cooked in a crock pot, organic probiotic yogurt treats, adds they're exposed to people in high-traffic businesses, meet strangers, notes that actual human societies call me to rescue, emphasizing all three are rescues.
So positioning herself as a responsible rescuer.
Exactly. And she states they've lived there since 2017, and the only 2 times dogs have gotten out were those brief 5-minute incidents she described. It's a really comprehensive defense, aiming to portray them as responsible owners of well-cared-for dogs, despite all the accusations.
Wow. Okay. So we have these detailed accusations, repeated problems, aggression, risk met with an equally detailed denial. Counter-explanations for barking, claims of quick resolution for escapes, assertions about the breed's nature, the dog's temperament, and a legal threat thrown in.
It's just a direct clash of narratives right there within
Yeah,
these comments.
totally. And it immediately sets the stage for the rest of the community to jump in and weigh in on these two, very different versions of reality.
Exactly. Let's see what they said.
All right, let's see how the Friends of Lake Winola community responds. Based on these comments, it looks like the conversation really branches out. You get different people adding their perspectives, sometimes supporting one side, sometimes the other, and sometimes just commenting on the whole conflict itself.
Yeah, we certainly see a group of commenters who seem to side with the initial complaint or at least express similar concerns about the situation.
Like Kathy Donovan. She seems to back Anya up, and she's really not impressed by the legal threat. Says the attorney will do shit.
Okay. Direct.
Very. She suggests filing reports with the police or state police is, a more effective route.
And Kathy really underscores the potential danger, doesn't she? She shares that personal anecdote about 3 dogs attacking someone and being shot by police because they packed together and were considered dangerous.
Yeah, that's a really vivid example of potential real-world consequences being brought into this online discussion. Quite chilling.
Definitely raises the stakes.
Then Judy Mensinger comments that the situation is getting old, describes it as very scary and annoying. Though she does acknowledge the owners probably love their dogs.
There's a little bit of balance there.
And Eleanor Jones-Quick offers just simple, direct corroboration on one specific claim. They do bark constantly.
Just stating it as fact.
Okay. Mike Mayer adds his voice, stating the dogs deserve a much better home, which implies he agrees the current situation isn't good for them.
Right, siding against the owner there.
And Eric Kingdom. He dismisses it initially as drama on the lake, but then he questions the owner's responsibility if dogs constantly get out, calls it a sign you shouldn't own a dog. He also feels the owner is over-explaining a lot, and contrasts it with his own dog, a pit bull, who he says never ever got out once and doesn't bark outside.
Okay, so bringing in his own experience as a comparison. So yeah, you see this group clearly expressing safety fears, annoyance with the noise, questioning the owner's capability, and sometimes bringing in personal stories to back up their view.
But just as strongly, it seems, we see another group emerge who question the initial post, maybe sympathize a bit with the owner, or offer different ways to look at the situation or handle the conflict.
Right. Jillian McGrady, for instance, she questions the proven claims of aggression. If the owner wasn't even aware, she asks, could it maybe be fear instead of actual aggression?
That's an interesting point. Perception versus reality.
Yeah. And Amanda Wiltsey echoes that idea about needing proof. She suggests the owner has a right to see these recorded incidents Anya mentioned.
And she explicitly raises the possibility that fear of their size might be playing a role.
She mentions her own Great Dane, says he's a big love bug, but often perceived as terrifying just because he's huge.
Right. Not saying it is the case here, but raising it as a factor.
Exactly. And Amanda, like some others, directly critiques the way this was handled, the communication method. She questions if shaming an owner instead of talking to them is really acceptable.
And suggests Tara might be over-explaining
Yeah.
simply because she feels attacked over issues that were never brought to her at-hand.
Yeah, puts herself in the owner's shoes a bit there.
Sherry Madar Diamond is very direct, too, calling the initial Facebook post childish and asking why the person didn't just go talk to the neighbor.
And the owner, Tara, actually responds to that comment, agreeing. Says she wished someone had just come over to talk like an adult.
Then Carolyn Headley Stancic expresses dislike for this kind of online conflict altogether. She gets the fear and danger of dogs getting out, traffic, even being shot. But she also emphasizes the owner's likely worry for their dogs and that the dogs are probably loved.
Trying to see both sides of the emotional aspect.
Right. And Rachel Honeycona makes a more general point. Owning big dogs requires training. It's a responsibility, not a luxury. She advises owners to be mindful.
Kind of a general PSA amidst the drama.
Yeah. And then you have these other comments. Ahuka Amakanati simply calls the owner a riot after reading her long response. Just reacting to the tone or maybe the sheer volume of it.
Yeah.
And James Billings observes, looks like the new residents are uneasy, which adds another layer, maybe suggesting the conflict is related to people new to the area, though it's really unclear who he means by new residents. Could be the dog owners, could be others.
Interesting ambiguity there. So yeah, the community comments really show the split. Some supporting the accuser's concerns, others defending the owner or questioning how the complaint was handled, and some just commenting more broadly on the whole dynamic.
Exactly. You just see the different perspectives clashing right there in the thread. Different
Right.
priorities. Safety versus responsible pet ownership, public warning versus private resolution. It's all laid bare.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, let's try and connect the dots here. Pull some key insights out of this specific exchange, based only on these comments. What does this whole Lake Winola situation really vividly illustrate about community conflict playing out online?
Well, first, I think it's a really powerful example of how these online forums can just amplify conflict. They immediately turn what might have been a private dispute into a public spectacle.
Right. Instead of a one-on-one chat, maybe over the fence, you've got accusations and these really detailed defenses broadcast to potentially the entire community. And that just invites everyone to pile on.
Exactly. And that public nature, it seems like it quickly leads to a breakdown in agreeing on even the basic facts, like, is the aggression real and documented? Or is it perceived fear because they're big dogs?
Yeah, the accuser says recorded multiple incidents. The owner says they have not an aggressive bone in their body. Without any shared context or like an agreed-upon authority, the different claims just stand there completely opposed.
Right. It just becomes this he said, she said playing out publicly, which makes resolution incredibly difficult because that foundation of shared understanding just isn't there.
You see it with the escapes, too. Is it again and constantly? Or was it just only 2 times for 5 minutes? Totally different pictures.
Totally different. And the method of communication itself, that became a core point of conflict too, didn't it?
Oh, for sure. Several commenters and the owner herself questioned why this was posted on Facebook in the first place, instead of being handled privately.
Absolutely. The platform that's meant for community connection suddenly gets framed as a platform for shaming or childish behavior, at least according to some people in the thread.
Yeah, it really highlights how you communicate a grievance in an online community can become just as contentious as the actual grievance itself.
That's a great point. And you see how specific details, even things that seem kind of minor, like the organic crock-pot food.
Right. Or mentioning the specific dog, Lou, needing testing for a disability.
Yeah, those details become part of the public argument, maybe intended to sway opinion or show responsible behavior, but it ends up airing a lot of personal information in the process.
And conversely, you get those dramatic anecdotes from others, like Kathy's story about the police shooting dogs.
Right, that gets added to the thread, and it just raises the emotional stakes significantly. It could potentially heighten fear among other people reading it who weren't even involved initially.
So this specific exchange in Friends of Lake Winola, it really shows us the potential of these online forums to just rapidly escalate local issues. Makes it incredibly hard to agree on facts. and it can turn the communication method itself into part of the problem.
Yeah, it's a real snapshot of how different perceptions and fears and communication styles just clash when they're put on public display like that.
And it really underscores the challenge, I think, of resolving conflict in a space where every single comment is public.
Yeah,
And trust can just erode so rapidly.
definitely.
So to wrap up this deep dive into the Lake Winola Facebook thread, it's pretty clear this is about more than just, dogs getting loose.
Oh, yeah, much more.
It's about neighbors, it's about safety, perception, communication breakdowns, and how all these things play out in that often really messy, very public arena of online community groups.
And based only on the material we discussed from these comments, it really leaves you with a thought to consider, doesn't it? In a community where people have such wildly different accounts, such different perceptions of the same events, whether it's dogs attacking or just barking, and where the very act of communicating becomes part of the conflict, what does it actually take to bridge that divide? How do you find understanding? Or maybe, is that even possible in that kind of environment?
That's a heavy question to end on. Something for you, the listener, to definitely mull over.